is it good for? Before we jump in today, we wanted to take just a little moment to reflect back on a previous episode that Brandon and I did last year. It was episode 5. It was called Grief, Legacy, and the Stuff We Carry. And that episode, it was a hard one for us. It came out around the time of the anniversary of our father's passing. And we really didn't know what would happen when we shared that story. But when that episode ended, we both knew that we had shared something that was very personal. It was heavy. And what we didn't realize was how many people would reach out to us in private and say, I really connected with what you said. I lived through a similar experience.
We heard from listeners privately, a message that we weren't expecting. People shared that they had lived through abuse too, some who had gotten out, and then sadly we know some that are still in it. And some who said it was the first time they'd ever heard their experience named out loud, so they were able to put words to those emotions or put a name to that's what I was feeling.
Yeah, after releasing that episode and hearing what different listeners had also experienced, it caused me to reflect on our childhood and some of the things that Mom had shared with us.
Yeah.
And it made me start asking a question that I wanted to address further. And I knew that episode 5, that couldn't be the end of our conversation. Yeah.
I think this sequel isn't about reopening the wounds or rehashing details. We've named the sore spots, but at some point you got to get past that. It's about something deeper. It's about breaking free. It's about naming that's what abuse is, and especially the kinds that stay hidden, the emotional abuse, the spiritual abuse, but not just the kind that leave bruises, but also the kind that changes the way you see yourself and also painting a path forward as well.
And it's also about hope. And it's not just the kind that says, stay strong or hang on. It'll all work out. It's about real hope, the kind that offers direction, safety, and permission to ask hard questions. And that's today where we're wanting to continue that story for us, to shine some light on some things. And to let anyone that knows who's listening, okay, you're not alone. This is something that others have also experienced. And we are so grateful that joining us today is Dr. Danette Garces-Webb. She is a licensed psychologist with over 20 years of experience working with individuals through trauma and grief, anxiety, and major life transitions. And about 10 years ago, I think Danette and I had met in church, that we were both attending the same church. And we recently had the chance to reconnect. And what stood out to me then and still does is how grounded and thoughtful her approach is when it comes to helping people with trauma and faith and helping people take real practical steps forward. She's also the author of her new book, Off the Couch. It's a book focused on therapy tools beyond the session and how to take that into everyday life. And she brings a faith awareness, compassionate lens that centers dignity and safety and hope without pressure and shame. So thank you, Danette, so much for being with us and for taking the time to share this conversation with us.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for inviting me to participate. I appreciate this.
You say that now. Wait till you talk to me.
Can't wait.
I'm going to break the therapist. Yes.
So many have striven to do that.
Okay. I'll be quiet now. All right, Bridget.
Before we get into the heavier part of the conversation, we wanted just to start off with what led you to write Off the Couch? I mean, what were you seeing in your work that made you feel like this book needed to exist?
There were several things that prompted the writing of that book. First of all, so many people are afraid to utilize therapy. They think about therapy as being this really, really big, scary thing. And there are not a lot of resources out there that really highlight that it is accessible to everybody. It doesn't have to be a big, scary thing and that you can utilize it. And so I wanted a helpful resource that people could utilize that wasn't too clinical, didn't use all of these conversations and words that people maybe did not understand. I wanted something out there where people could connect to, oh, this is a real life story. I can utilize this example. They use this in this situation. I also wanted to humanize the therapist. In the book throughout, I talk about opportunities for myself. I talk about opportunities for my family and experiences, and then show how to utilize some strategies. But then I also wanted something that people could use, even if they've already been on the therapeutic journey. This is something that they can add to what they have already learned and have already experienced in the therapy room.
Right.
The other thing that I often find as a therapist is that I could tell somebody something 10,000 times, 10,000 times. They hear it elsewhere, it's slightly different, and it connects differently. So those 10,000 times might have been the foundational layers for it. And then they heard it in language that also further connect and then can utilize it. And so that was my hope with this book as well. Maybe the information you're getting is the 10,001 time that you heard this information and you're like, oh, I get it. And then I also wanted to have a resource out there for folks that feel like therapy is not for me, or I'm on a wellness journey, or I don't feel like I have to see anyone, and I feel like I'm okay. We are very dynamic individuals. We're not meant to be static. We're meant to grow and take opportunities every day to grow. And so I wanted this to also be utilized for those folks who are simply looking for opportunities to grow.
Sure.
Just a shorting.
Yes. Well, it was a great read. Very,
Thank you.
I think I did it in like a day. It was just an easy read, but it really touched on several things that are very relatable and very easy to implement. And I really appreciate how your book focused. It took a lot of real life applications because I think with people that are living in abuse, it's not theoretical.
Yes.
It's a daily struggle. And sometimes the hardest part is not knowing what you're dealing with in the first place.
Right.
And so I'd really like to start our conversation there with why you think it's so common for people to be in abusive relationships and not recognize their situation as a.
Okay, so that is a very complex question because there are many factors that play a role.
Sure.
So many different factors. Immediately, my head goes to if we don't have exposure and awareness, information, knowledge, how do we know what abuse is and what isn't abuse? Okay, and so if we don't have that information, we can't recognize. The other thing is exposure. If I grew up in a family dynamic where expressing love is done through belittlement, harsh jokes, is done through, I am hitting you, not for my own purpose and benefit, but to make you better. If you're raised in a family dynamic where you're given this information of you are worthless, you're not any good, that's what you begin to think is appropriate and right. That is your definition of what life's supposed to look like. Okay.
Right.
So you don't know then what a healthy relationship, what a healthy interaction could be until, again, you get that knowledge and then insight from others. Another part of it that impacts things is social, cultural, religious definitions and expectations. Okay. There are a lot of messages out there that highlight power dynamics, that highlight specific roles for individuals that they should be playing, that highlight consequences of if you don't do this, then this and this and this is going to happen. Okay, if you don't do this, if you don't submit, then you are failing from a faith aspect or failing as a person. Okay, you are to listen to individuals who are in positions of authority. If you don't, you are being dishonorable and disrespectful. And you can bring shame not only on yourself, but on the individual with whom you're not listening or your family as a whole. There are like significant consequences that are then associated with it.
Right.
One of the biggest things that I find is that it is so subtle too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Abuse can be so subtle. A joke. Oh, it's just a joke.
Yeah.
So something that starts off as teasing might seem rather harmless until it escalates. Or jealousy and control might feel like, oh, he or she is just really into me. That's their way of showing me that they like me or that they love me until it escalates. Or they just did it that one time and they felt really, really, really bad about it. And they promised me that they weren't going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And then it escalates. Okay.
Yeah.
It can be very, very, very confusing, especially when you're receiving this different information. I love you. I hate you. You're great. You're worthless.
Yes.
Right? And it keeps people in a state of anxiety and rather perplexed. And
Right.
so it could take a long time before a person realizes that, wait a minute, this is not right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand what's happening.
Right. How, in your professional opinion, how can culture, faith, and family structures sometimes blur the lines or make it harder to speak up? Because I know for us growing up in our religious backgrounds, and I don't even know that religion necessarily had anything to do with it, but
Yeah.
we were in we were always told like the father, he's the leader of the home, he's the ruler more or less, and that we were all submissive to what he had to say. And there's a line there between respect and authority, but yet it's also, I think that line got really blurred for our mother, who instead of being like a partner, she had to be a submissive.
Yes. So, in all of those areas that you identified, there can be very express expectations. There is a specific role you must play, and to not play that role means that you're not adhering to the expectation of such. I know, for example, I'll just speak on from like a Hispanic perspective. There is in a lot of Hispanic families this expectation of the male is who's the head of the household, has the final decision making abilities and capabilities, everyone else has to fall in line. And even though there might be some disagreement, ultimately, the man has the final say in many of these family dynamics. And to push up against it again is disrespectful. And you're
Yeah.
not following the stated and unstated rules. And the same thing with religious dynamics. Many of times I visited church and realized, okay, this may not be specifically the place for me
Mm,
because of the clear expectations. I was
right.
recently speaking with somebody and they were talking about the fact that they had went for fun to visit a place and the clear message was regardless of what's going on, you ultimately have to support your husband. Period. No matter what.
Mm,
And messages like that really open the door for abuse to happen because
yes.
we're taught you don't question. You don't
Hmm.
question. And if you have a disagreement or a difference in opinion, you keep that to yourself. And then those messages are then taught to the children. And
Right.
then those children teach and push out that message further. So we have this cycle of abuse that ends up continuing to happen.
Yes.
Culturally, or as a society, I should say, we push what happens in the home stays in the home. I'm not
Hmm.
talking about Las Vegas. We're talking about in the home. What happens in the home
Yes.
stays in the home, right? And whatever happens here is nobody else's business but our own,
Right.
right? And you'll hear other people say, well, that's happening in their house. I shouldn't interfere. And so it
Mm,
perpetuates again this cycle of harm. And when we say it's not my business, we become enablers of that.
right.
We're not doing what we can to interrupt that. And then we look at media where it highlights dominance in some ways as this very sexy, attractive thing. The
Mm-hmm.
thing where you can feel protected if someone has this level of dominance and control.
Right.
And that can serve as fuel for problematic thinking and actions and behaviors.
Right. What beyond, I think everyone can I agree with the recognizing physical abuse, but what about the things that are not easily recognizable, whether it's psychological, spiritual, emotionally? What would be some of the red flags people could be, oh wow, I can relate to that. I'm experiencing that or I've seen that in another family member.
Okay. Um, Unfortunately, and in some ways, fortunately, there are many signs. And I say fortunately because if we miss one, we have the opportunity to act on something else.
Yes.
So the first thing I want to say is these labels of emotional, psychological, spiritual abuse overall can be confusing. And so just to clarify, emotional and psychological abuse, a lot of times we use that interchangeably, and they
Mm-hmm.
can be used interchangeably blah, on a greater level.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to like hone in a bit, we can think about emotional abuse as that being targeted towards feelings, the emotions, making someone fearful, making someone feel worthless.
Mm.
And then psychological abuse can be more specifically targeting things that are going to make you question your reality. It's going to undermine your sense of self. Okay. And
Yeah.
that's where things like gaslighting comes in, coercive control comes in, that controlling behavior, that checking in of your text messages, your emails, your phone, seeing who's messaging you, wanting to know where you're going, who you're going to be with, controlling where you
Mm-hmm.
go, who you see, who you talk to. Those are forms of that psychological abuse. Things like I'm trying to brainwash and tell someone what their thought should be. You
Mm.
don't you don't want to go see her. You know that that's not good for you. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right? And receiving that, those types of messages over and over and over again. Or
Mm-hmm.
even as malicious as, let's say I put my keys down somewhere and then coming behind me and removing my keys and my wallet and then pretending that I didn't do that at all so that me as a victim starts to really doubt what my reality is.
Right.
Or saying things like, let's say you and I were in a relationship and we're at a party. And at this party, you embarrass me, emotional abuse, and humiliate me in front of our friends. And that impacts me. And so we
Yeah.
go home and I say, when you called me that name and when you laughed at me in front of everybody and made me the joke of the conversation, that hurt. And then you potentially engaging in psychological abuse might then say, "That what are you talking about? That didn't happen.
Mm.
I didn't do that."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then me as the person who's receiving this abuse may then, I'm pretty sure that's how it happened.
Hmm.
Right? And so it begins to result in me questioning my
Right.
perception and how I'm experiencing the world. Or, no, you're just sensitive. Everybody knew that that was a joke.
Mm.
And then again, me questioning, I know it didn't feel like a joke. I know how I think I felt, and it hurt, right?
Right.
But those are aspects of psychological abuse. Aspects of emotional abuse include, again, that belittling, that humiliating threats,
Mm.
yelling,
Mm.
breaking things, destroying one's property to incite fear and control. And even if the person that's abused is not really going to follow through, when you start threatening people that the victim loves, children,
Mm.
members, pets, okay, it puts them in a state of fear because
Right.
they're not sure, especially with what they are seeing, right? They're not sure.
Yeah.
So it's rather insidious. It
Mm.
starts small and then it escalates and continues to escalate until there's so much damage and brokenness.
Mm.
You asked about the spiritual abuse as well.
Yes.
I will tell you that through my years as a psychologist, the amount of individuals that I've seen come through my clinics, and I've worked several places, several states, my clinics with religious trauma is really, really sad. And it is so common, unfortunately, so common, especially when we use faith. And I'm talking about religion from all different types of religion and beliefs and
Yes.
spiritual connections and such. We use faith as a thing that helps to ground us. And as people, I tend to see folks putting a lot of emphasis on those who are in spiritual authority. And then that makes the wounds that are inflicted that much greater because
Mm.
there's an expectation that, and we do this whether we know that we're doing this or not, we see people in certain positions. And so we have then an expectation that they are going to respond, act, be a particular way. And so when they don't, the injury of that is pretty significant.
Mm.
Now,
Yeah.
spiritual abuse is using spirituality, faith, belief systems to control, manipulate, abuse another person. It is very diverse. It can look like forcing someone to practice your beliefs. It could look like preventing someone from actively practicing their beliefs. It can look like ridiculing someone because of how they believe and how they choose to carry out their beliefs. It can look like forcing someone to do something that they don't want to do under the guise of, you believe this way, so this is
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do. And that includes forcing marriage, which I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
forcing someone to stay in relationships and stay in situations because this is what's expected. This is what your God says that you have to do, or this is what me as your spiritual authority says that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It can look like, hey, this is the cross that you are meant to carry.
Yes.
So you need to carry it.
Mm.
And in some ways,
Wow.
be thankful for the opportunity that you get the privilege of carrying this cross.
So they put you, the victim, in the position of, okay, God has you here in the moment to experience this trial and tribulation.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. One of the things, and I have some biases and you will hear them coming through, and I apologize ahead of
No,
time.
that's fine. We have our own, I'm sure.
One of the things that, and hate might be a strong word, so I strongly dislike, is when people misuse, God will not give you more than you can.
Mm.
That is so harmful for folks.
Sure.
It's making the assumption that one, a person has the same spiritual alignment that you do, which is really, really dangerous. Two, it's telling that person, suck it up. You're not doing this right.
Yeah.
Right. And just be patient.
Oh.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a person who's on the hurting side of things hearing that.
Right.
Right. That does not feel supportive at all. It marks you as an individual then who they can't trust and who they can't go to,
Sure.
right? So the definition of spiritual abuse is very, very broad. It presents in
Sure.
so many different ways, and we just have to be very careful of the words that we say and the actions that we do and the assumptions that we're making.
Well, I know personally that there were times where I would look at our life in the moment. We don't have it as bad as someone else.
Yes,
So
yes,
there's
yes.
like this comparison that we put ourselves in, like, okay, I can endure this because it's not as bad as someone else, therefore my situation isn't as severe.
Yes. May I make a point to that?
Please do.
Okay. You know how everyone says comparison is a thief of joy?
Mm.
Okay. But comparison also keeps you very much stuck in tremendous ways.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a person will not leave a relationship, a situation, because, like you said, they compare. Or they do this: I'm not being hit.
Mm-hmm.
Since I'm not being hit, it's not as bad,
Right.
right? So I should stay, or I can just wait it out, right? Or even too, when they have children, sometimes that comparison comes in. Well, at least my kids aren't being hit. I know situations where the kids are severely abused, and I'm the only one being abused in this way,
Yeah.
and psychologically and emotionally. And my kids may be being abused psychologically and emotionally, but they're not being hit. So as long as they're not being hit, right?
So we sort of try to rationalize it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is not, again, this is not how it presents for everybody,
Sure.
right? Giving you like pockets of examples how it can manifest and present,
Right.
right? And that comparison bit is a big part. Big part. I've worked
Yeah.
with folks that have said, I don't have it as bad, like you were giving that example. I don't have it as bad as so and so. So that's why I stayed. And then our
Right.
journey has been then to create this recognition of, is it bad? Yep.
Mm.
Is it bad for you?
Right.
That's what's important here. Is it
Yeah.
bad for you? And would you subject somebody to this? No. Okay.
Well, you brought up the comment of why people stay, which sort of leads me into the next category I wanted to cover, because looking back at our experience having conversations with our mother, one question that kept coming up to me was, okay, why did we stay? And there were a lot of reasons. I mean, there were lack of resources,
Absolutely.
fear of what people would say, that they wouldn't believe us.
Yes.
There was the religious expectations, and not even at times recognizing the different types of abuse that we were all experiencing in some fashion.
Yeah, there's a factor there that, if I can interject.
Yeah.
Dr. Danette, I didn't realize anything was wrong
Yes.
until I was 20 years old. And because we had isolation, middle of nowhere, go past civilization and take a left, and then plus being homeschooled, there was no comparison for me.
Right.
And so when I'm 20 years old and I get exposed to another family dynamic system where the family actually had a family meeting for a whole hour on where they're going to go to eat, and everyone had an input on that, and I wasn't told where I was going to go eat.
Right.
This began to be wait, this is how this is supposed to function? And then
Yeah.
as a young adult go, wait. And I remember the moment it took place. I had to leave their living room and go out on their front porch. And I just broke down and started bawling like,
Absolutely.
and I didn't even know what was going on. I do now. It was comparison of that shouldn't have happened, but I just thought that was normal. I thought that's what everybody else did.
Right. Right. Yes. And the recognition when a person who's been in that situation as an adult, when they have that recognition, the flooding of emotions and questions and confusion that's present, and then anger,
Mm.
right? Trying to
Yeah.
make sense of all of this and then trying to figure out, what do I do with all of these emotions? Absolutely. Because then now your whole worldview has been turned upside down, and you have to figure out there's a different way of living. Wait a minute, hold up. And then I was deprived of all of that. That is a journey, and that is a journey that's really hard for a person as an adult who just knew that they knew the world
Mm.
and what to expect.
Yeah.
And now they have to deconstruct that version of their world.
Right.
Yes.
Well, you just described the entirety of my 20s. That's it in a nutshell right there, was complete disillusionment and I did not know what to replace that worldview with.
Right, right.
And it was a crisis of faith as well, because father was the central figure, but it was my personification of God, for lack of better words, because it was the main authority figure. When all of that started to crumble, about midway in my 20s, buddy, I was ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And
Right.
so keeping my head screwed on straight was tough. And it took me, not just in my 20s, but well into my 30s. The saving grace, Dr. Danette, was marrying someone, and here's a contrast, they ain't got no emotional abuse. They don't know anything. No, the family's not perfect, but there's no skeletons in the closet. No one hitting everybody. No one screaming. It's like,
Right.
I don't know how to see the world through a place. Oh, you have a chance to breathe.
Right. Right. And it's so important that partners that recognize this is what's going on with their loved one give a place for that
Yes, ma'am.
to occur. Right? Because if you
That's what
don't
me and Bridget has said, is that the greatest gift that ever happened to us is we married spouses that
Mm,
understood what we were coming from and
Yeah.
gave us this. I just told Bridget this the other day. One of the reasons that my ambitions and drive to do things in life have been like really just tapered off. It's like bottom of the barrel. Is because all the ambitions and goals I had were done from a place of fear to try to protect myself. And then as I've awakened in my 40s to realize I don't have to be anything but I am, because I've been blessed with something. I'm accepted, and all the good, bad, and ugly. There's a lot of things I don't want to do anymore because I don't have to do them anymore.
right. Yes. Yes. And I'm very thankful in your guys' behalf that you guys did connect with folks that are the way that they are and they gave the space for that. Can you imagine how problematic it is when a person doesn't have that and they
Right.
have accidentally connected to someone who is close to being a carbon copy, right?
Wow.
And then further feeling stuck and
Yes.
receiving this message then accidentally of, it's me. It is me.
Mm.
I'm
So you're
worthless.
just reinforcing those wounds, reinforcing those scripts.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Reinforcing those scripts and strengthening an inaccurate, unhealthy, problematic narrative,
Mm.
which highlights the great importance of having the appropriate individuals in your community, in your circle, in your
Mm.
spheres, so to speak, right? That can be supportive, give the space for growth, give the space for discovery,
Yeah.
make attempts to understand where someone is coming from
Right.
and not internalize it and make it personal about themselves.
Mm.
Right? That
Yes.
having that space for that healing is so important. Having the space to have people in your life that will listen and support without judgment is so
Yeah.
important.
Well, on the topic of why people in abusive relationships stay, there was a line from your book that I wanted to share. I know
Okay.
you used it in a totally different context, but whenever I read books like this, I'm always like sifting through, ooh, what sticks out to me personally? What can I relate to in my life? And you said you should not take ownership over everything, but you should take ownership over the things that are explicitly yours. And in the context of a survivor, a victim of being in abusive relationships, I think victims are often taught that everything is theirs to own. Their blame, the consequences, the abuser's anger, it's all
Right.
theirs to own.
Yes.
And that really stuck out to me because it was like, no, it's not my fault. It's not my responsibility to take and carry what their struggles are. And I mean, this episode, Grief, Legacy, and the Stuff We Carry, it really resonates with the idea not taking ownership for the things that aren't actually yours to carry.
Right.
So, can you talk about how abuse will warp a person's sense of responsibility and why that makes leaving so hard?
Absolutely. So when one is given the message time and time and time again that the reason why something is happening over time, they can begin to incorporate that and internalize that and make that their own. And
Yeah.
if something keeps happening, well, then it must be true, right? So then there's this distortion of reality, okay? And then over time, as you continue to endure abuse, your self-esteem is impacted. And you believe messages that coincide with messages of this narrative you're being fed. You're
Yeah.
internalizing that I'm not worthy, that I'm not good enough, that I am somehow responsible,
Mm.
right? And then if I'm not worthy, if I'm not good enough, I'm somehow responsible and bad things happen and I play a role in those bad things. If I were to
Yeah.
leave, how do I know these same things are not going to happen? And it's just going to reinforce messages that I'm already receiving here, right? So time and time and time and time again, if you're given these messages, well, they say it's my fault. So then begin to take ownership of such,
Yeah.
especially if there's nothing contrary to that being received,
Right.
right? There's nothing contrary to that being received. It plays on to the your definition of love and your definition of responsibility overall. If I'm taught that it is my responsibility to listen and do things a certain way, it is my responsibility to smooth things when things are going bad,
Yeah.
then I'm responsible if things aren't smooth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm responsible if something is not happening in a favorable way,
Wow.
right? So the internalization of these messages and then the confirmation of those internalized messages make it very hard for a lot of folks to move past of this is mine and I need to keep this. If
Yes.
I were better, it would have been different.
Oh yeah.
See, the long-term effect of living with that sensory input on the edge, I mean, just constantly on edge because you're scanning the environment to see how safe am I. And I'm
Yes.
always trying to predict the environment to
Yes.
see what kind of controls I can put in place. And those controls, in my case, would look very healthy. I was always the peacekeeper.
Yes. Oof.
Mm.
Okay. And one of the things I was processing what you were saying, and I was replaying a constant threat that my father gave me. Now, I'm going to say something, and it should trigger an alarm with you because I'm going to say some good things about my father. I'm going to say some bad things. You know, Daddy provided for me. Daddy, I didn't go without food. I didn't go without shelter. I didn't go without clothes. Daddy paid my way through college. Daddy bought my first vehicle. Daddy did a lot of things. But there was a constant threat that Daddy did when I don't think he did it to Bridget. He did it to me. And I'm going, son, I can take you up on the road and drop you off. And you wouldn't be able to make it without me. How are you going to earn money? That was a big constant thing with Dad. You live under my roof, and at any time I can kick you out. And the long-term effects on me has been I don't want to compare myself to a soldier that's been in war because I've been around them. They had PTSD. You know, that level is just. But I have lived 40 years. I mean, the first 35 at least, just on edge. And
Yes.
the slightest thing would set me off. I'm constantly scanning the room, expecting the worst. So if I can predict the worst, I can prepare for the worst, and I can be safe. It's exhausting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Part of the superpower of an abuser is to create a dependence, okay? And then to remind the individuals that you are not capable of doing this on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that power dynamic,
Yes.
And so then the brain, like you are talking about symptoms that are very much like hallmarks of PTSD, like this constant scanning in your brain, constantly like, okay, if I do this, what could be the possible repercussions of that? And
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant
playing,
chess move. It's a constant chess
yes,
game.
trying to
Yeah.
be 3 steps ahead here in order to be safe.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so then your system is on fight flight mode all the
Yes.
time, which it's not meant to be like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then your brain starts to interpret the danger in all of these different situations that may not necessarily be dangerous.
Yeah.
Because if I let my guard down, something bad is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you said it's exhausting. Absolutely. Because your body is revved, your brain is revved. And again, that's not the state that we're meant to be 24/7. But that's certainly a state that a person who's enduring, experiencing, suffering from abuse does experience.
Right.
I have a question, and we're
Yes.
just going to go down a rabbit trail, and I want to hear your opinion on this.
Okay.
It's interesting in my life, the people that have come into my life, I'm the type of person, I'm a very good listener, and always people were sharing their problems with me. And I have noticed that people in abusive relationships, it's almost like they got addicted to the negativity, and healthy relationships are not stimulating enough. And so they're bored with that. And so they're getting out of those healthy relationships and going into something that's bad that resembles what they already know, because that's what's stimulating. Is that even remotely accurate?
Okay. Let's go down this rabbit hole.
Yes.
We will fight to go back to what's familiar. Okay. So, people who are on a weight loss journey, when they lose a lot of weight, their body fights to go back to where it was, and then sometimes more. Okay. So a person who has been through toxic, very unhealthy, abusive relationships, they know what that's about. They can survive. They know what to anticipate. Put them in a situation where it's healthy and it doesn't resemble what they're used to. That feels dangerous. I don't know how to maneuver through this.
It's not predictable.
It's not predictable. I have all these feelings. I don't know what to do with them. I am confused. This is scary. The devil you know versus the devil you don't. Right?
Yeah.
And so it feels this healthy, again, caveating everything I'm saying that it's not the same for everybody.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So this healthy relationship can feel like the devil because it's not familiar. It feels dangerous. I can't anticipate. I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know what to think about this. And so sometimes they may return to a former situation, or sometimes their reactions and responses may accidentally create something that they're used to. I'm going to tag, I'm going to pick at you. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. Okay. Now you're yelling at me, and now that feels familiar, and I can relax a little bit. I don't like that yelling.
Right.
But it feels familiar, and at least I know how to deal with that. But when you're sweet and you're loving and you tell me it's okay and we'll work through this, something bad's about to happen. I'm going to wait for this other shoe to drop. I don't want this other shoe to drop. I don't know when it's coming. So I'm going to, not always intentionally and on purpose, but create a situation where I feel better. It sounds counterintuitive, but internally, I know how to deal with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, also, I wonder if being exposed to so much situations where you're the victim and you've internalized that negativity, you have the belief system that says, I really and truly don't deserve healthy treatment. And so if someone's treating me healthily, I'm going to doubt that there's some type of motivation going on here behind the scenes. I can't trust this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I can't trust this. So I'm going to put myself in situations where they make more sense. And I can trust the behaviors I'm going to engage in to keep myself safe. Yes.
Well, in recognizing that, how do you break that cycle? So
what you're asking is, how do I do things differently? And the first thing that you have to do is acknowledge first. Okay? Change has a hard time happening if we're not acknowledging what we're experiencing and what we have experienced. Also, that includes acknowledging the emotions and acknowledging the confusion. Okay? And then looking for those patterns of behaviors and actions. So if a person is sitting in the room with me, we might talk about what tends to be your triggers. Well, when this happens, then blah, 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 blah. Okay? Okay, so then tell me about the thoughts. Well, I start to think, and then we start to uncover what the thoughts are. So when this happens, you start to think this, and then you start to engage in this. Where's the first step that you feel like we can begin to attack?
Mm.
Okay. And then we build up being able to identify cognitive distortions, right? Like, what are those thoughts that trap me or that get me stuck or that may further increase the spiral?
Yeah.
What are my default actions that might tend to keep me stuck or might contribute to the spiraling out?
Mm.
Here are some ways in which you can challenge those thoughts. Let's look at other perceptions and ways of possibly taking a step back and looking at this situation. We work on trust. In what ways can I begin to trust that I have the capability to respond in a different way? In what way can I trust that what I think about myself is accurate and I don't have to trust what someone else is thinking about me or what they're trying to say about me?
So the trust that you're referring to, as I'm speaking hypothetically from a victim's perspective, are you referring to the victim being able to trust themselves, not the abuser?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Building that up, building that up. And in that
Mm.
process, we're also working on building up your ability to use your voice, your ability to set boundaries for yourself
How
as an
does that work when I'm taking myself back to our childhood? Using our voice was not an option. So it was, I mean, I didn't make decisions for myself until I chose to get married. And
right.
so how does in a situation where the abuser is so controlling, how do you take ownership of your voice and use it?
Okay. I'm going to caveat again. Okay. Because in many situations, there's an appropriate time and a not appropriate time, and you
Sure.
have to weigh the situation out. Yes.
Yes.
Right. So as a child standing, I'm going to make some assumptions as if they actually happened to you. I don't know. Okay. As a child, if I'm standing looking at my dad and he's saying stuff to me and he has his belt in his hand, using your voice in a certain way goes against survival.
Oh yeah.
Okay. In your head, if you have the cognitive maturity, emotional maturity, development, you might
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm not going to say anything because of safety.
Sure.
What they're saying to me and what they're having me do, I'm rejecting here
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't, something worse is going to happen. I mentioned a story in the book about when my husband and I were dating and we were canoeing, and
Yes.
while we were canoeing, there were a number of individuals on the bank, and they clearly had some racist notions and threw out racist slur. In our heads, we reject those racist slurs.
Yes.
In the moment, because I was not a swimmer, we did not say anything, and it looked like compliance. It looked like fear, when in all actuality, it was the best situation, the best move, for that situation. It's what
Yeah.
ultimately kept us safer.
Sure.
Okay. When one is out of the environment where the abuse is happening, that gives us a lot more leeway and permission to utilize that voice in a very strong way.
Okay. So for the people that are potentially listening that are not out of that environment,
Yes.
how does that work in the moment for them?
I would still encourage expression, such as, it hurts me when, I feel like when, right? So having the opportunities when you can to still express what the impact is, but being intentional about when you express that.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So if the abuser is raging, that's not the safest time
Right.
to use your voice in a certain way. What you might opt to then do in that moment would be, I'm going to soften my voice. What can I do right now that's going to help us?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You look towards disarming.
Yeah.
In that moment, you may decide that is not safe for me to use my voice in a manner that's going to feel confrontational, that's going to bring on further damage.
Right.
The individual has to weigh it out.
Sure.
They might say, stop, stop, I can't do this. And if they assess the person to be able to receive that, then yes.
Yeah.
It speaks,
So, I'm sorry.
it speaks to what, Brandon, what you were saying about this constant trying to assess what should I be doing in each moment. And it leads further to that exhaustion.
As you were talking just now, I was imagining certain scenes back when let's say 12, 11, 10. And I've gotten to the place in my life where, I no longer see my father as simply the abuser. I know things about grandpa, okay? Okay. So hearing those stories from grandmother, I had enough sense as a young man to get the truth out of her. And I was like, oh, apple didn't fall far from the tree. And Daddy's got his own sense of being a victim. So it
Right.
really helps you bring some healing. It doesn't justify it, right?
Okay.
But I was just thinking about the stress that's going on in a 10, 11, 12-year-old boy's mind where, and I shared this story cautiously, and I've shared it before on the podcast. I've shared it in one of the books I've written. But I remember the night when I loaded my shotgun. And those of you that hunt, I cocked it. It was ready to go. And the only thing that stopped me, I think, was just good common sense. It just something was. But I'm trying to imagine a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old just. I mean, cognitively, do you have the ability to press pause on your emotions at 10, 11, 12 and say, what am I feeling? It's very difficult.
It's very difficult for a child,
Okay.
especially if they're not taught any of it and it's still in development, right?
Right.
Adults sometimes struggle with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't have an easy solution for that, but I was, if I would say to my younger self, Bridget, answer your question, the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me was having an outside source say something to me that was so dynamically positive that it breathed life into me, and it was a seed that would germinate later on, because
Well, that's where I sort of wanted this podcast to be that first seed for those that are listening. Hopefully, they don't have to wait 20, 30 years for that to happen for them. So I wanted to maybe discuss what does a safety plan look like that listeners in these situations that they could start forming to make that first step to getting out, breaking free, breaking that cycle.
Okay. What Brandon was saying earlier about having those outside connections, those outside voices is really helpful. So for like children and for people that are struggling to find their voice in a situation, having those outside connections really help. And so as part of the safety plan, finding people, connecting with people that you can say something to. Okay. First step. There is so much power and control in silence, right? And by beginning to speak up and telling someone, anyone, it has the ability to start to hit up against all of this control that you feel like someone else has over your life. So, one, identifying people that you can trust, okay? Safety. It might be somebody out in the community. It might be a family member, or it might be neighbors. One of the recommendations, like when we talk to people about safety plan, is do you have a neighbor that you feel like you can trust, and you can tell them what's going on, okay? And you don't feel like that person would then betray your trust and say something to your abuser. And when they identify that, they're then encouraged to reach out to that person and say, hey, I am experiencing this. Here's what I could use from you. If you hear sounds of violence, If you hear sounds of abuse happening, please call the police. Okay. The other thing that we encourage folks to do is to create an escape plan. What that escape plan looks like is one, identifying ways in which you can leave the place, right? So let's say we make the assumption that the abuse is happening in a home. What is the fastest way that you can get out your house if you need to just go? And then practicing that route. Practicing, we got to go, we got to grab our stuff, let's leave. Okay. Yeah. And then also identifying the places in the house that are not safe, which would mean any rooms that are furthest from the exits. Okay. Don't go to the bedroom. Don't go to the bathroom. Don't go to the kitchen. Don't go to a room where there happens to be weapons. Those are the places that you would want to avoid. So when we remove those, what are the places in your house that you can go to if you have to, in the moment, stay in the house and flee the situation until you can get out? Okay. Yeah. Having an identified place that you can run to, whether it's a friend, whether it's the neighbors or a family member or something like that. And then at that place, having your escape bag. We don't wait to create a bag for when we need it, like in the moment. We do it in anticipation of. And so if you know that at some point I got to leave, I just don't know when I'm going to leave, create the bag. And in the bag, you may have copies of important documents, some spare keys, money, clothes, medications. If you have kiddos, items of comfort, because it is so disruptive for their little brains and for their bodies that they could use something to help regulate and feel grounded. But you would have that elsewhere. I would not advise, if at all possible, to keeping that at home because it has potential of being found.
Sure.
So if you can have that elsewhere in one of your identified safe places, then that's a much more safer route to go.
Yes.
Additionally, having numbers of people that you can contact. I don't know, like if you've ever been in a situation where in the moment, like things that you knew, you can't access it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a big supporter of external brain. My phone is an external brain. Notes, external brain, right? Because in the moment, my brain isn't maybe focusing in on some other things, have the resource handy, but again, have it listen in such a way that you know what it is and it doesn't cause you harm if someone else found it. Right? You might opt to keep that in your glove compartment. You might opt to keep it in your wallet, but it's external brain and you can utilize that. You have a question.
Well, I constantly go in my mind going back to our home environment and our childhood because it's what we know. And I know everyone's situation is going to be different, but I imagine we're not the only ones that had this experience where it was our mother she left a couple of times. She came back. Primarily, I mean, I think there was a couple of reasons. One being she felt an obligation to hold up her wedding vows.
Yes, that's huge.
Secondly, there was no financial support. I mean, Dad would say, "You want to leave? Leave. You got nothing. You won't survive. I mean, you can't take anything. Everything's mine." Blah blah blah. So, I guess I'm trying to establish if someone's experiencing a similar situation, what are their options that they can say, okay, I don't have to go back. I don't have to stay because I have this, and this that I can resort to. What would those options look like?
So there are a lot of resources out there that can provide shelter, that can provide recommendations for financial assistance.
Okay.
And also, this is where the open communication comes with others, with people in your life. Hey, if I leave, I want to leave, I don't know what I'm going to do about finances. maybe that person that's trusted can then help you figure out, okay, so maybe you stay with me for a month and there's no obligation for anything. Or, hey, how about I look at possible resources for you and we can then come up with a plan on how to address that. The other thing that we would encourage folks is if they know that they are eventually going to leave and if they are somehow able to quietly, secretly open their own account and somehow begin to siphon away money or open or achieve a credit card and be able to have that as a resource, then that could help with giving this sense of independence and, oh, I might be able to do this. But that open communication, reaching out to someone you trust cannot be overemphasized. I can emphasize it, and I'll never emphasize it enough. And I want to say, on average, it doesn't surprise me that your mom tried several times because on average, it takes a person about 7 attempts before they are able to successfully leave. And the leaving can be very dangerous. There's a statistic
Yeah.
out there that says that women, let's say the woman is the victim in this situation, that women are 70 times more likely to be killed weeks after they leave.
Wow.
So the danger is very real, and the attempts to leave and going back makes sense when you think about that statistic. Again, I can't overemphasize the connecting to somebody else so that it's not just you trying to come up with all the plan and the strategy
Yeah.
and the resource. You already are trying to survive.
But that brings up another concern I've had. I actually was told of a lady that was being abused by her husband. She confided in her minister at her church, but the minister encouraged her to stay with the husband out of respect for their vows. And how would you address a situation like that where someone is reaching out, but unfortunately they're being advised by someone they're looking up to stay in that relationship?
Yes. So my response to that would depend on who I have sitting in front of me. If I had someone who valued my opinion as an authority in certain topics, just like they value their spiritual leaders' authority on certain topics, I would talk to them about, I hear where your pastor is coming from. And if we were to look at the teachings of Christ, his comes from a position of love, grace, safety. And we are not meant to subject ourselves to harm in this manner.
Mm.
And I would strongly ask that you consider that your physical and emotional well being are just as important as your spiritual well being.
Yes.
Love is not supposed to hurt.
Mm.
And so, if you want to try to continue to work on your relationship with your spouse, I would encourage you to do it from afar, where it gives you guys the opportunity to build up your relationship from an emotional perspective
Mm.
without continuing to experience the physical consequences of being in a shared space.
Yes.
Would explore it from that perspective,
Yes.
right? And I would also talk to them about how we are not just made up of one part, that the being and how we were created consists of the emotional, the physical, the mental, the cognitive, the spiritual, the financial. It consists of all of these facets.
Yes.
Okay. And continuing to receive pain from one facet while not also embracing and taking care of the other facets is not helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
That's the manner in which I would approach that. So, as a mental health provider, we have a choice in regards to how much we share and how much we don't share of our personal lives and our
Sure.
personal beliefs. And we have to take caution in that because I want folks to feel safe in my room. I want them to feel like they can talk about anything and everything. I only have 2 rules in my room: mutual respect and don't throw anything that's not meant to be thrown. As long as we honor that, we're golden. Yes?
Yeah.
And so as a mental health provider, we're very careful about what all we share. Now, I also am the type with my personality believe on getting as close to the line as possible and sometimes stepping on the line without going over. The
Sure.
goal is, could this be helpful? Could they utilize this in some way? And so in some of those moments, maybe become aware of what my spiritual background is and what my belief system is.
Sure.
Right? Because sometimes they cannot hear from someone if they think that that someone has 0 clue.
Mm.
Mm.
So you're telling me to pay attention to my physical and my emotional, my psychological, and my pastor's telling me to do this, but how do you know? And at that point, I might be like, so as a believer,
Yeah.
I believe that we are not meant to have to experience these things. I believe that there were things put in place so that we can
Mm-hmm.
walk a healing line, so that we can be restored. And I don't believe that XYZ. But
Yes.
that's where I'm coming from. And that's why I'm saying these things.
Mm.
And
Right.
you can take it and you can leave it. You don't have to take what I'm saying,
Right.
but I feel like I'm hearing you where you're coming from and that you have a respect for your pastor.
Mm.
And I just also want to highlight that
Yeah.
what my belief says, and I'm wondering if your belief matches that. I'm just curious, right?
Yeah.
On this air of curiosity to allow for them to have the opportunity to do the expression,
Yes.
right? By no means am I conveying I'm right or I'm wrong. I'm
Sure.
creating a space for them to talk about things with someone that they're like, "Oh, they seem to have some similar ideologies." Maybe they will understand now if I go a little bit deeper.
Right. Well, we've talked about the abuse and why people stay, and we've talked about the path toward freedom and how communities they can come together to support survivors and victims. But I wanted to pause and just take a quick moment to address anyone that's listening and you feel trapped in your home, in your relationship, or in silence. We want you to know that you're not alone. We know the questions that keep you up at night because we've had them too. Where would I live if I left? What would my family say? Would God be disappointed in me if I leave?
Mm.
We've wrestled with those same questions, and you're not wrong for asking, and they are survival questions.
Right.
But you deserve to live without fear. Faith was never meant to chain you to pain. God does not call you to endure abuse. He calls you to live in safety and to have peace in your life. So you don't have to have all the answers today. You won't have them today. But we just want to encourage you to take one step, tell one safe person, make one phone call, or write down your truth because there is help, there is hope, and there are people who will walk beside you.
Well, I think it's a great chance here to list out some practical resources. We may have people that are ready to take a step. Even just thinking about that as a possibility is a big step. And I think there are resources available, and we want to list a couple of those that we recommend the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-SAFE. Thehotline.org. And there's faith-based organizations like Call to Peace Ministries and Focus Ministries. Dr. Garces-Webb, do you have any additional resources that you would recommend to listeners who are wanting to take that first step?
We can also consider the Children's Advocacy Center. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but the National Children's Advocacy Center. A lot of times, well, they're primarily known, 60% of their work is towards addressing child sexual abuse, but they also address severe physical abuse. And so if your children are experiencing abuse, you can go through contact NCAC, so National Children's Advocacy Center. That's really helpful. They provide access to counselors and safety guidelines and legal indications as well. If
Wow.
you are military related,
Mm-hmm.
active duty, a family member of an active duty member or an active duty member who's experiencing violence, there is the FAP program. It's an advocacy program, and you can get information through the militaryonesource.mil.
Mm-hmm.
But they set you up too with an advocate who can talk through safety plan, get you into someplace safe, connect you to financial and legal resources as well. And it's very, very helpful. They don't just here, you're gonna do this. They follow and they make sure.
Wow.
Okay. So a lot of times you might feel like you're being shoved to a resource and that's it. FAP does a really good job of not releasing until a person is taken care of.
And that's
Okay. And
awesome.
again, that's for military related folks. And then
Okay.
here in the local area, we have the crisis services of North Alabama. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's 256-716-1000. And they also provide lots of resources, help connect you to appropriate individuals. They have a great outline for a safety plan where this is what you can do to prep. This is what you want to do prior to, and just different considerations that
Mm-hmm.
might be helpful for someone to be aware of. And then lastly, sometimes again, remember earlier I said in the moment we might not be thinking through all the things and we might feel
Right.
incredibly
Right.
overwhelmed.
Yep.
You can always reach out to a church if that feels like an avenue that one feels safe enough to reach out to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So caveating that. And then the other thing is you might cold call a therapist's office. I know a policy that we have in my office, my clinic, is when someone calls for assistance, if I cannot provide us, like if I can't see them, we do not let anyone go without providing them with some sort of resource, numbers, something,
Mm.
right? So if someone were to call my office and say, I'm in a domestic violence situation, I am being emotionally abused, I don't know what to do. First of all, those who answer my phone, they are really good at not letting me drop something like that. And what I mean by that is they'll say, I don't have that information for you. I'm going to have Dr. Garces-Webb give you a call back. And then they will hound me. Did you call that person back? Did you call
Mm.
back? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is important. Safety is important. Above all, safety is important.
Yes.
And calling someone may take 15 minutes of my time. Safety is worth more than that,
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
right? And so if you cold call someone, they may be able to provide assistance in that regard.
Yes. So
Fantastic.
an
That's
option
great.
for definitely a small step forward in pursuing an action plan for sure.
Yes.
Excellent. Those are great resources. And Bridget, I'm sure we'll compile those and list
I
them out
will.
on a separate screen so
Yes.
people can have that. Well, I think going through this episode today is clear that breaking free isn't just about physically leaving a situation. It's about
Right.
reclaiming your peace, your
Yes.
identity, and reclaiming your hope.
Definitely. And I think recognizing that pain doesn't have to define our story. It can, however, shape how you help yourself and others around you heal.
Yes.
Well, we're very grateful to you, Dr. Garces-Webb,
Yes.
for joining us today, sharing your experience, your insights, and helping guide this conversation with care and clarity. This episode
Yes.
has been the most we've been on point because I wasn't yakking so much. It was great. I loved it. This is great.
Well, in your perspective, I mean, it helps us be able to talk about these hard things with honesty and without shame, and most importantly, with hope for those that are listening.
Well,
Yes.
to those who are listening, if this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who may need to hear it. You are not alone. There is help,
Yes.
and this is not the end of your story.
So maybe life is good for learning how to take one brave step at a time, for reclaiming our peace, and for helping others heal. This is life. What is it good for?